Hi, my name is Parker Kiefer. This is my final presentation for Ed 300, and I just want to start off by saying that this class has been amazing. It's been great. Being that I am still in my bachelor's program in English, not in my teaching credential yet, this class was really helpful and beneficial to me so that I can be better equipped, more prepared. And in learning about all these different learning theories, I was able to develop my own personal philosophy of learning and education. And I hope I can utilize this in my own teaching because currently I am a high school guitar teacher at Foothills Christian High School. That's where I went to high school, and there's several different factors that lead me to have myself be better equipped because I went to high school there. So I know the types of students that come there. I know the learning theories and the philosophies of education that other teachers there have established. I've been able to have good conversation and dialogue with those teachers in the past, so I have a little bit of a leg up. But if I were ever placed in a different school or a different district to teach in, this class definitely helped me build some strategies and some ways that I can develop myself as a teacher to better myself and better my students, because my biggest emphasis is just giving these students more success, better academic futures. And I just want to thank Professor Jacobs for that instruction, that opportunity to learn how to better myself and to establish a more structured and correct learning theory philosophy. So I wanted to start my presentation by addressing the learning theory that I chose to adhere by and that I support fully, and it's scaffolding. We had a assignment, I believe 2 weeks ago, that talked about 30 plus learning theories, and this one kind of stood out. A fellow student of mine, Tyler, also put in his discussion that he enjoyed this theory as well. And I also am a big advocate for it for several reasons. Just to give a good understanding of what scaffolding learning theory is, it was inspired by Lev Vygotsky. He was a Soviet psychologist, and he delved in the realm of education and also philosophized a lot about education and their environment. He thought about and philosophized. Sorry, hard word to pronounce. He thought about and he also made a lot of contributions to the sociocultural theories on education. And just to better understand what the sociocultural aspect of education is, it's simply the environment and the language and the diversity that all those factors hold. And being able to understand the environment of a school or a classroom or a student's life is super imperative in understanding scaffolding, because scaffolding really touches on all those elements, and it also works towards figuring out how to better the student despite those elements, whether they be positive or negative. He also advocated for independence in the pursuit of knowledge, and that's kind of a very big foundational and fundamental aspect of scaffolding. Is the idea of independence in school and finding that pursuit and being able to establish and having a diligent mindset towards that pursuit, because students at a young age do not always have the best work ethic, or they don't know all the best methods or strategies to work towards establishing a good work ethic. And scaffolding is a good way to rely on their prior knowledge, but also build their current situations so that they can find new knowledge and find new ways to understand the different subjects in school and those core contents. And he also established this idea of the zone of proximal development, and we will get into that very soon. It is a very big part of scaffolding, and it is a very monumental factor for students to understand, especially for teachers to be equipped and to be educated on. Because if a teacher wants to utilize scaffolding learning theory, there's a lot that goes into understanding this sub-theory in and of itself, if you would say. So the picture I have shared here is just, sorry if my screen's in the way a little bit, but it's just a good indicator of what the zone of proximal development looks like in terms of scaffolding learning theory. And there's these three sections. There's what is known, and then this middle section, which is the zone I want to talk about the most, and then what is not known. And because these two sections on the left and right are the most clearly stated, I'm going to address those first. When a student comes into a class or a new grade or a subject that they are not very educated on, they are off the bat going to understand, what do I already know, what is my prior knowledge, and then What do I have no idea about? And then there's this weird gray area that students encounter, and it's touching on subjects in that class that are too difficult for them to master on their own, whether that student be very intelligent or not. But there's this solution, this resolution of a teacher being able to guide them and encourage them from someone who does know what is known. If we were to show maybe a graph or a diagram of what the zone of proximal development for teachers looks like, this gray area becomes their what is known area. The teacher should be very proficient and educated on the subject that they're teaching, so that because they know everything in that subject matter and what questions they would ask, they would be able to be prepared for. They can help guide. And that's a big part of scaffolding, is just that guidance aspect to the student of how they can become well acquainted and to learn the subject material with guidance, so that when the student is faced with a problem or a part of that subject, they can rely on encouragement and guidance from that teacher, so that when they're placed in a setting where they're learning the next grade, that gray area becomes their known, what is known area, and then they have a new problem or a new issue in a subject or a text that they can learn, and that becomes their new gray area. Issues and problems with teachers who do not understand the zone of proximal development is that they teach too much of what is not known. They do not delve into what is known and this gray area of difficulty for them to be guided. And they either teach what they already know or they teach what they do not know. And it's important to establish a foundation of what they do know and what they can pull from their brain that they've learned in previous grades or experiences, and then build off of that. That's why this arrow is at the bottom, is because you build off of what is known, and then you can guide and encourage them. And there are several articles and books and resources that I researched for scaffolding theory, just to get some more insight and see who was advocating for it in their own classrooms. And Douglas and Nancy Frey did an amazing book called Guided Instruction. And this image on the right here has been used quite frequently in scaffolding theory, and we will get into all those aspects later, but they named their book Guided Instruction. And it's a part of the zone of proximal development that kind of touches on that gray area. And some main points I took from their book was that they talked about having room for error in scaffolding theory. And sometimes as a teacher, and myself included, when your student messes up or when they get something wrong or they're so far from the point that you want them to learn to know, you can be discouraged, or you can sometimes give up on that student, or you really get on their case for doing something wrong or doing something or failing. But that's one of the best things a student can encounter is error, and having little room, not saying there's a large margin you can forgive any grade or anything, but having room for error is important because it prompts them to think critically. It prompts them to figure things out, to ask for help, maybe look within themselves to see what they did wrong, and look at their work, look at anything that they've done, and be able to problem solve. And that kind of coincides with our next point, was about teacher-student relationships. And this is something that plays a lot into my philosophy of education, because if there's no relationship between teacher and student, it's really hard for that student to, A, want to do better for that teacher, but B, be able to feel comfortable asking questions, being able to feel comfortable talking about their current situations at home if that's difficult, or if they need more resources, if they need more help. There won't be any connect there if there's no prior relationship established. They also talked about sharing goals and having shared goals, and that basically means that there is this concept of the teacher and the student being able to work together. And if the teacher lays out very concise and clear goals at the beginning, and the student can see that teacher is working with them towards that goal, and they are constantly reaffirming that goal within that student, there's going to be a shared effort that will be a good experience for both the student and the entire class as a whole. And feedback is a common part of most learning theories, but in scaffolding theory, the feedback is really important, because if there's this progression of teaching with the student, and on the image on the right, it says, I do it, and that's the teacher giving instruction. Without feedback, we can't really make it to these next two stages, because the student needs to be able to learn from that teacher and to know exactly what that teacher would like, rather than being left in the dark. And another advocate of scaffolding learning theory is Rebecca Alber, and I really enjoyed what she had to say about the theory itself. Just to give her a little bravo on her credentials, she was an instructor at UCLA's Graduate School of Education. She's an editor on the source that I use from a website that is listed at the end, if you'd like to see that. And she gave 6 points. She gave 6 points on why scaffolding is effective, and some tips as well. And what I really took from and liked about her little article about scaffolding was just to pre-teach vocabulary and just the importance of that left side of the zone of proximal development. And I can go back to that real quick as well. That when you pre-teach vocabulary, you kind of make this subcategory between what is known and the gray area, because if you're teaching or if you're saying things that the students don't understand, or if you're touching about things in the text, especially in maybe English or even in math or history, almost any subject where there are terminology or words that need to be understood, and you do not want to assume that these students know exactly what you're talking about, it's important to, at the beginning of the school year, to go over what those words mean and how to understand those words. And that doesn't have to be a lot of open text reading. That can be through visual aid, which I'm going to get into. That can be through more tactile exercises. And I thought that was a really good point, just to establish that the kids can know what you're talking about, because the hugest part of the zone of proximal development is starting from what is known and then building from that. And if they do not know, how are they going to learn? Talk about how visual aid is really important in scaffolding, and in building that relationship of the teacher teaching and then the kids being able to work on their own. In the middle, there can be some really good memorization, but also relatability of having visual aid and having pictures. And if students can think about visual aids that you've had in class while they're working on their own, or they can utilize the visual aids that you use in their own work at home. They can take things home, pictures, charts. Being able to organize the class in a more visual sense can help students be able to see exactly what you would like for them to learn and for them to pursue through the homework and through the class discussion. And then lastly, Rebecca Alber talked a lot about strategic questions and being able to stimulate dialogue in not necessarily Socratic seminars, but asking questions in a way that will not only prompt thought, but also encourage discussion and encourage dialogue between the students and between you and that student. And that's why on this picture right here, we do it is very, very important that you, or myself as a teacher, can establish methods that can encourage inclusion and unity in the classroom. And this is part of that image. Let me go back. Of the I do it, we do it, you do it together, you do it alone. This is what I love most about the theory, and this is how it looks like in the classroom. In my own class in guitar, I teach would be the first step, and then the second step is that we do exercise together, and then me being present in the classroom, but the students doing stuff together. And I kind of approach this from a more collaborative method, and then you, student, does it alone. When I was in high school, just to give a little insight about my high school academics, we had Mondays and Fridays be independent study and working at home. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we were in class, and then Friday we had a set amount of homework, and then Monday we had a set amount of homework. And I thought this method was kind of absurd going into high school because I wasn't used to that, but I really realized that it promotes scaffolding in the sense of giving students an opportunity to develop their own work ethic. This can be dangerous because some students left at home can get distracted or not know how to do their work without having help. But if you do scaffolding effectively and correctly, they have the tools and they have the means necessary to get help and then be able to work on their own. And I think one of the most important aspects of in the classroom, understanding how to effectively administrate this theory, is by laying a lot of work and laying a lot of thought and premeditated thoughts towards the first section. And that's just as the teacher. If this is falling on me as a teacher, what's my responsibility to get to the next step? Because once the student is doing it alone, they need to be able to rely on the back three. And you're not always going to be able to understand your classroom's dynamic or how they're going to work together, but you definitely know as a teacher what you can do and work really hard to be the best of your ability. We talked about, and this is a little tangent, but we talked about the importance of how, as a Christian teacher, of working hard and being diligent. We had a lot of assignments talking about how you can be diligent as a teacher, and what you put in is what you're going to get out. And as a teacher, if we adhere to the scaffolding theory and really put in that work to be the best teacher we can be, and the we do is going to be a lot more effective, and then the you do is going to be really beautiful to observe your students be able to work together once they've grasped that material. And then once you see the progress on their own, it will better them to be able to work and have their own work ethic. And I really encourage really focusing on that first step the most. In terms of the classroom, there is a lot of good results that come out of scaffolding, and how that last step can put them on track for future success. Because that's all we want as teachers, is to give them future success and set them up for their careers and for life skills, and be able to establish their own learning theories, and how they can learn best, and how at home when they're in college they can know exactly what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Because if they get there and they don't know what they're doing, it's our responsibility as teachers to try to prepare them for that. And I touched on this before, but working alone enables students to learn from their failures. Students will fail, and students will not always understand everything. The smartest students will not always understand everything, if you believe it or not. And even though we as teachers should put a lot of effort into the first step in terms of building off what they do know, and then helping them, encouraging them, and guiding them through what they don't, there will still be a lot of good that comes out of their failures, because they can have stress, a little bit of anxiousness, but that should not be caused necessarily by the workload, but that can be caused by not knowing, and that can produce a healthy result of finding ways to acquire knowledge and to acquire what is right in that problem. And that kind of leads into the second point of critical thinking. It's a very common aspect of teachers who want their students to learn, is to establish a method of critical thinking and be able to pull from the resources, which is my next point, to be able to come back to the school with questions, to be able to establish their own methods, and to branch off of what the teacher is teaching and what the teacher is enforcing, so that they can have insight and that they can have that collaborative effort in the class that is not just teacher to student, but it's a working relationship. And I hope that can be more enforced in the classroom, because the more the student feels involved and appreciated and included, especially at the younger ages, the better they will do. I had no sense of the word or established my own philosophy of learning prior to this class. Being an English major, I have been establishing my writing and how to write effectively, and to communicate my thoughts, and to answer prompts, and to do well in that aspect of my education. But in this being my first education class, I really learned what do I want as a teacher? Because this is my first semester as a teacher as well. I got to figure out, what do I want as a teacher? What do I want out of my students as a teacher? How do I teach? What is my my favorite way to teach, or that I think is most effective? And collaborative learning is huge. Not only building chemistry between your students is really powerful, building chemistry between the teacher and the student is imperative. And I've already talked about that for a little bit. But to touch on what I said before, is that the more that your students like each other, the more they're going to like your class. And this is not some soundproof theory that you can do certain methods and certain things that are going to make your class like each other. There is a social aspect of schooling that you cannot always get around. But the more that you can produce assignments and that you can produce work that is collaborative, the more you're going to, like at the beginning with Lev Vygotsky, I believe his name is, Vygotsky, is that there's this, I'll get back to that, social cultural aspect of school that we need to better ourselves on and more educate ourselves on. And if we are integrating collaborative learning, we will make a better environment for our students. And I said a project-based learning hybrid because I don't believe that a purely project-based learning classroom will do all that you need as a teacher in that first step of scaffolding. I believe that regardless of scaffolding as well, projects are great for collaborative work and for unity and for tactile work, especially with hands-on, being able to really meet the needs of all your students. But you also need the work that's in the text and the work that's in the books and in papers that can establish them as writers. And also with technology, integrating technology into education is really important. but I want to find a good balance, a good hybrid of both those elements of schooling. Individualized feedback is not always easy with bigger classrooms. It's been easier with my own guitar class that I teach, being able to give them exactly practical steps on what they did wrong, what they did good, making sure to affirm what they do good. That's a big part of my philosophy, is positive and negative feedback, not negative, but constructive. And lastly, what I've been talking about throughout the whole presentation is just that student-teacher relationship, because I work in ministry and I've been with kids that have awful family lives. I've been with kids that do not have parents. I've been with kids that have just been hurt in many ways, and I really am compassionate towards them. And if I were to be placed in that setting as a teacher with younger kids or with high school kids, I want to be mindful of that. I don't want to impede my boundaries as a teacher, because there are boundaries that do not need to be crossed, but I also want to be there for them as a caregiver and as a friend. Here are my sources. I really enjoyed the class. I hope that this was a good, accurate presentation of scaffolding theory. If you want to check out any of these articles, you may. But thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you learned something.